What if motivation is not a spark but a silent debt we owe to ourselves? That question ambushed me one night, when my mind felt chewed apart by dopamine loops, unread messages, unfinished projects, and the strange modern laziness that doesn't feel like rest, but like drowning in slow motion. I kept wondering why focus slipped through my fingers, why my attention scattered into digital dust, why learning, something I once adored, now felt like pushing a stalled car uphill. And the real paradox was this: I wasn't exhausted from effort. I was exhausted from avoidance. Avoidance is heavier than work. It corrodes from the inside. I had been reading Nietzsche's warnings about comfort breeding spiritual anemia, and William James's relentless insistence that action precedes inspiration. Their voices rose like two different storms inside my skull. Nietzsche demanded that I stop shrinking from the fire. James insisted that I start with the smallest flame. Somewhere between those two poles, I sensed a challenge forming, almost mocking me. Live 1 week by their rules. A week guided by courage and practicality. A week where I would treat my life not as something to endure, but as something to shape. The idea terrified me, which meant it was alive. I imagined what it would mean to face the day without bargaining with my mood, to confront tasks instead of flirting endlessly with distraction. Would my motivation return? Would my brain finally stop begging for easy dopamine? Would I learn to act before feeling ready? Or would I collapse under the weight of two philosophies that never promised comfort, only transformation? I didn't know. And that uncertainty felt like a doorway. I decided to walk through it. But the moment I chose the experiment, something in me trembled. A quiet suspicion that following Nietzsche and James for even 7 days might expose the fragility of the self I had been protecting. A self stitched together by habit, reaction, and old fears. I felt the ground under my life tilt gently but unmistakably, like the first hint of an earthquake. And so the week began, not with confidence, but with a question that still hasn't released me. I didn't expect the week to begin with a feeling like a punch to the chest. It happened early in the morning, before sunrise, when the world was still quiet and the air felt heavy. I woke up and felt that old pressure in my mind, the one that whispers, "Stay still. Don't start. Not yet." It was the same voice that had controlled me for years, the one that kept me scrolling, doubting, waiting. But now I had promised myself something different, and the promise felt sharp against my skin, like cold metal. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing slowly, realizing that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it is just the act of standing up when your whole body wants to stay down. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee without looking at my phone. It felt strange, like I was lifting a weight I had forgotten was there. The silence made me feel exposed. My thoughts ran wild, trying to pull me back into old habits. Nietzsche's words echoed in me, the idea that comfort can rot the soul. James answered with his own reminder, "Start with one small action." So I focused on my breath, on the warmth of the cup in my hands, on the simple fact that I was awake and not hiding. Then came the first test of the day, a task I had avoided for weeks. I opened my laptop, felt resistance grip my stomach, and forced myself to begin. Not perfectly, not bravely. Just begin. And something strange happened. The moment I took the first small step, the fear softened, as if it had only been waiting for me to move. I realized how often I waited for motivation, as if motivation were a gift instead of something built through effort. As the hours passed, I kept choosing action over escape, even in tiny ways. Each small choice felt like placing one stone on the ground, building a path I didn't fully trust yet. It felt lonely, but in a quiet, honest way. And somewhere in that honesty, gratitude rose inside me. If this journey touches anyone else wandering through distraction and doubt, I hope they stay close. If you feel it too, you're welcome to subscribe and walk this strange path with me. By evening, I felt a new kind of tiredness, not heavy but clean. It was the first sign that the week had truly begun. By the third day, the experiment no longer felt like a choice. It felt like a mirror I could not put down. I woke up with a heavy chest, the kind of heaviness that makes you move slowly, as if the air around you has thickened. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel motivated. I only felt exposed, stripped of the little tricks I usually use to distract myself from myself. My mind was tired, and my habits were fighting back harder than before. It felt like standing in the center of a storm I had created. I tried to begin the morning with intention, but everything inside resisted. Even brushing my teeth felt like dragging a boulder across the floor. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Who am I trying to become? Those questions didn't inspire me. They scared me. I realized that when you remove your usual escapes, you meet the raw truth of your own inner life. And that truth is not always kind. I tried to work, but instead I found myself staring at the screen, thoughts spinning in circles. My focus broke again and again, slipping through my fingers like water. The pressure inside me climbed. Every mistake felt like proof that I was failing the experiment, failing myself. I felt trapped inside my own expectations, crushed under the idea that I should already be better, stronger, calmer. At noon, I gave up. Completely. I closed everything, lay down on the floor, and let the weight press on me. I didn't fight it. I didn't try to fix it. I simply let myself fall apart. And in that collapse, something surprising happened. The fear didn't get bigger. It got clearer. I saw how much of my struggle came from trying to control everything. My thoughts, my feelings, my mood, my progress. I wanted the week to turn me into someone heroic. Instead, it showed me how human I really am. Nietzsche's demand for courage suddenly felt impossible, and James's belief in small actions felt too small. I was stuck between two ideas, unable to follow either. But the strange thing was this. Even in the collapse, something inside me whispered that falling apart was part of the work. Maybe the self has to crack before it can grow. I stayed there on the floor, breathing slowly, letting myself be broken, letting the moment be exactly what it was. And in that stillness, a thin, quiet strength began to form, not confidence, not clarity, but a readiness to stand again when the time came. When I woke on the fourth day, something inside me felt strangely calm, like the quiet that follows a long storm. My body was still tired and my mind still messy, but there was a thin space inside me where fear didn't immediately rise. It wasn't strength. It wasn't victory. It was more like a small opening, a breath of air after being underwater too long. I sat up slowly, expecting the old dread to crash down, but it didn't come with its usual force. Maybe I had finally stopped running from myself. Maybe collapse had washed something clean. I walked outside before touching any work. The morning light felt soft on my skin, almost gentle, and the world seemed different. Not because it had changed, but because I had stopped gripping everything so tightly. I realized that for days I had been trying to force myself into a new shape, but growth doesn't come from force. It comes from contact, real contact with reality, with habits, with the truth of what I can and cannot control. Nietzsche had pushed me to face discomfort, but now his words felt less like fire and more like a challenge to stand honestly in my own life. James whispered that the smallest step still counts as long as it is real. When I sat down to work, something unexpected happened. I began without trembling. The resistance was there, yes, but it wasn't as sharp. It felt more like weight than pain, something I could push through slowly. My mind wasn't clear, but it wasn't running away either. I chose one task, and I did it. Then another. I didn't chase motivation. I didn't wait for the perfect moment. I simply acted, slow and steady, like climbing a hill one step at a time. Later in the day, I noticed something subtle, a new pattern forming. My brain didn't reach for distractions as quickly. The craving for easy dopamine was still alive, but quieter, like an echo instead of a command. Each time I stayed with the discomfort, it felt less frightening. I was building something, not confidence, not discipline, but trust in myself. A trust that said, you don't need to feel ready. You only need to return. By evening, as the light faded through my window, I felt a soft strength rising inside me. Not loud, not heroic, just steady. A strength born from the simple truth that I had faced myself, broken and still moved forward. On the seventh day, I woke with a feeling I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't pride. It wasn't excitement. It was a quiet sense of direction, like a compass settling after days of shaking. The week hadn't made me stronger in the dramatic way I once imagined. It had made me more truthful with myself, and that truth felt heavier and lighter at the same time. I got out of bed slowly, not rushing, not bargaining, simply moving through the morning with a steady rhythm that surprised me. My thoughts were calmer, but not silent. My fears still whispered, but they no longer controlled my feet. As I made coffee, I realized something simple but powerful. The experiment never promised transformation. It only promised honesty, and honesty changes you in small, deep ways. I looked around my kitchen, the same space as always, but I felt different inside it. Not larger, not better, just more awake. I thought of Nietzsche's demand for courage and understood now that courage isn't a roar. It's a choice you repeat. And James's practicality finally made sense to me. The way you live is built one small action at a time, even on the days you feel like collapsing. I sat down to work, and for the first time all week, I didn't feel like I was fighting a war. The day moved forward with a calm weight, and I followed it, steady and slow. I wasn't free from distraction. I wasn't free from doubt. But I had learned how to return to myself each time I drifted away. That, I realized, was the real victory of the week. That quiet returning again and again, until the returning itself becomes a habit. Later in the evening, as the sun slid down behind the buildings, I felt a soft warmth in my chest. Not joy exactly, but something close to peace. I had expected the end of the week to feel like a triumph, but instead it felt like a beginning made of small stones, small steps, small truths, a beginning that didn't need noise. I walked to the window, watching the fading light, and I felt grateful. Grateful for the struggle, the collapse, the rise, the clarity that came from facing myself without escape. If this journey touched something in you too, if it helped you feel less alone in your own fight for focus or courage, you're welcome to stay close. Subscribe if you want, but only if this path feels like yours too.